Hello class, it's me, and here's a quick update for the week, and then I'm going to do a demo for today's lesson, which is going to lead right into the assignment, the first major assignment for Sunday. And I'll make sure that this Thursday there's no additional exercise, so you have the week to do this exercise and the first major assignment, which is contour drawing self-portrait. Okay, so few quick notes. Everybody is doing really awesome. I haven't gone through the whole forums to see that everybody is commenting, but what I can tell so far is that people are really getting involved, and it's really exciting that you're really owning this discussion and bringing your ideas to it and creating a real community. It's much different from working in a traditional class, but I think that you're all really doing amazing in making this this space work and learning from each other, and that's really the way it should be. It's not just the instructor, it's students to some extent teaching each other. Okay, what would help is if everybody could load an avatar, and it does not have to be your face if you're not comfortable with your face, but up in the top right corner of Blackboard there should be there's a little button to do, let's see what it is. Yeah, there's a little your name should appear in the top right corner, and when you click on it, it says settings, and click on that, and personal information, I think it is. Yeah, personal information, and personalize my settings, and then you can upload an avatar. And it just helps identify everybody, and it doesn't have to be your photo. It could be a cartoon or a photo of your cat or something, but it just helps create a more individual identity, so that we kind of get a sense of everybody being separate, right? And as opposed to just a black square with a gray profile of a guy. Okay, that would help. Academic writing. So it's really important that we use spell check, even for these kind of semi-formal discussions. Like, I want to keep them a bit on the casual side, but also on the professional side, so we can have this discussion. But when we're writing, it's a lot different than when we're speaking, because speaking is very conversational and writing has more rigidity. So if I was just writing what I just said, then it might not function properly as complete sentences. And what I really would like to see is for students to double check their work and make sure you're writing in complete sentences, capital letters for proper nouns like I and name of a place and somebody else's name. So capital letters, proper punctuation. Complete sentences is having a subject and a verb. So a person, place, or thing, and then something that you're telling us something about that thing. So, and it can be this way or this way. And if Word isn't checking that for you, catching all those grammatical issues, then you can download a trial version of Grammarly, and I find that also helps, because sometimes I get rushed, and Grammarly does check a few things that I miss because I bang out a thought too fast. So please do that. And it's not just because it makes you a better communicator and more professional sounding in this course, but it is a skill that you'll need for the rest of your life in a professional context. And it makes communication more clear. If a person needs to read a sentence over and over to figure out what the other person meant, then that it creates barriers to understanding. Okay, photographing your work is really much improved, and I appreciate that. So people who watch the video on how to document your work with a camera, a phone camera, and I can see a difference in how you're presenting your work, because the lighting is more even, so you don't have shadows. It's daylight balanced and not incandescent, which has a yellow tone, and it's not distorted, so it looks like this and not like that or like that, right? So keep that up. If you are able to create a consistent setup where you always photograph your work in the same place, then that helps. I realize it is kind of tricky that if you have a lot of graphite on an image and then you use a flash, or that the light from a window is bouncing off it and you get these yucky highlights, and I get that that's could be frustrating. So try to not use a flash. Try to have the light hitting it more at an angle so that so the light isn't bouncing like this. You know, if you're the camera and your work is here, then the lighting isn't right behind you. It's lighting it from the side evenly, and then you're also less likely to have it cast a shadow with your arm or your phone or your head. So please keep that up. It looks a lot better, and it makes us see your artwork more clearly. Anybody who's posting images that appear this big, so bigger than the monitor size, then click on edit and then click on the photo, and then there's these little tabs on the corner that you can drag them and make them smaller, so that when we're scrolling through, we don't have to scroll through really large images to get to everybody else's posts. So, and that's also going to help. If your image is portrait format and you post it this way, landscape, then that's also distracting. So what you can do is, wherever your image is stored in Windows or Mac, I don't use Mac, but I'm sure it has a lot of the same functions. They might just be presented in a different place, but in Windows, you right click on wherever you have that file saved, and you can say rotate left or right. Okay, so that's probably the easiest way. But Windows 10 also has a picture editor, so that you can click on the photo and do some basic editing functions like cropping and increasing the contrast. And sometimes I use that because it's faster than opening up Photoshop. That being said, if one day you want to learn Photoshop, I really, really strongly recommend it, but it's not a necessity for this class. Okay. Last thing before I get to the demo is I did lock the forums as I indicated I would last night, because I want to keep the conversations going, and I want to create an incentive for students to get everything done by Sunday so that we're not borrowing time from the future. So I do feel a little bit mixed about that, because some of you have some really great conversations going, and the only thing I can say is I'm reopening the forums for today, just because there's a couple of students that didn't get everything in last night for whatever reason, if they're confused or something, and we do have at least one new student who came in last week from the waiting list. So I'll reopen them for today and email that person. But other than that, try to get everything in as early as possible so that we can end that week's activities on the Sunday. Okay, that's it, and I'm going to pause my video so that I can set up for my demo. So see you in 2 seconds. All right, so before we get to the demo, I'm going to just cover a very brief description of the 5 components or sub-skills of the global skill of drawing. Just like there's a lot of other things like reading or speaking or cooking that involve a group of skills that are combined. So drawing can be broken down, according to Dr. Betty Edwards from the book Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. Drawing can be broken down into 5 skills. And the first one, perception of edges. So when we're looking at this edge and following those lines, right? And being aware of this side of an edge and this side of an edge. They share the same edge, but sometimes looking at the outside, as we talked about, which is the negative space, will give you a more clear and objective understanding of that edge than this side on the positive space, right? Okay, perception of edges. Number 2. My Sharpie is dying. Perception of shapes. So what is this entire shape, and how can we break it down into a more simplified shape, for lack of a better word? This form, how do you simplify it? How do you simplify this form, right? And to break them down. Oops. Then 3. Perception of relationships. Okay. Perception of relationships. So it's comparing one thing against another thing. And that could be, how large is this shape compared to this shape or this shape? How is this shape placed on this, in this composition? Now that I've gridded it, it happens to all fall in the top half. So would you be able to see that without the grid? In theory, as you develop those visual analytical skills, you will be able to make those kind of assessments as you develop how to visually break down the construction of an image. So that's 3, perception of relationships. That also has to do with perspective and being able to visually perceive illusionistic depth. But we'll get into that probably next week. And then number 4. Perception of light and shadow, which we've been doing this last week with the tonal range scale, and you all did really, really well with it. So, how much of a tonal range does this image cover? There's not a lot of pure white in here because the background is like a kind of a toned paper, and I mean, it could also be this image is like 400 years old, so there could be some kind of decay in the paper, but that's an aside. Anyway, so there's not a lot of pure black in this image either, but you see the greatest range of contrast up here and almost no contrast here, right? The in terms of the lightest lights and the darkest darks, and then all a range of grays in between. So there's a lot of privilege paid to the top of this, which does make our eyes kind of stay up here longer than down here. And I'm saying this not as a good thing or a bad thing, but just be aware that the artist in this case has put a lot more emphasis on here, and this area is less developed and has less range, so our eye keeps moving back up. Okay. So if you wanted to make an image where the viewer moves their eye around more evenly, then this area down here would be equally developed. But it's not uncommon for an artist to put so much emphasis here because they want to lead the viewer here and make this the primary focus of attention. Okay. 5. Perception of the Gestalt. It's a fancy word for perception of the whole. Okay, so the Gestalt is being able to study all of those things that we just covered simultaneously, just being aware of them. You can kind of switch back and forth, but as you're trying to analyze this image, whether you're just studying it to appreciate it or you are trying to copy from it, then trying to learn how to look at all these things that we've covered here. Okay, so if you want to copy that down in your sketchbook, I recommend it, because this is basically everything you need to know about how to copy a drawing or copy from reference. And then the more you do that, then you'll be able to draw from your imagination. Okay, for today's lesson, which will lead right into the first major assignment, is I have these 4 images by Albrect Durer. Got a lion and a little girl and a hare. This is probably his most famous image. It's probably the most reproduced. You can buy posters of it on Amazon, I'm sure. And then this is a portrait of a goldsmith. What I've done is I've gridded all of these. So I'm introducing another technique for you to learn to move information from from a reference to your drawing. And the reason I'm working with a drawing as your reference as opposed to a photo, we've worked from photos and we've worked from life, but it's important to try a little bit of all of these. And there are some advantages of working from a drawing as opposed to a photo of an object or working from life, because similar to the way if you're learning music, like piano, a lot of times people will practice a song that already exists, right? And there's something to be gained by copying from another artist. And I know like that word is kind of really loaded, and it's not cheating, and it's not copying in a negative sense. It's learning techniques from another artist who has already figured out how to do proportions. They've figured out how to do cross-hatching. So they've done the work to translate the real world, which is what you see here, into a two-dimensional image of marks. So you see how like the marks here are really soft and the marks here are really rough and sketchy right here as well. So they've done the work to interpret the real world into a drawing, and all you're doing is learning their techniques the same way that if you were playing the piano and you'd be learning the techniques of another musician. And the more reference that you look at, the more that you will develop your own style, because you're never going to draw exactly the same as Albrect Durer. You're going to pick your own materials and different things that you like about the various sources you're looking at. So you can see this one is a little bit more photorealistic than this one. This one has layers of cross-hatching that go like this. So I'm going to get you to choose one of these, and all four of them have a different rendering technique. I would say this one is possibly the most challenging because there's so much detail, and it's probably the most realistic. And the only way to do this, well, not the only way, but the way I would suggest is probably to render it in charcoal and then lift up little bits of fur with the edge of a white eraser. That's one way. I think this would be really challenging to do with pencil, to fill in all those little gaps. So I'd say this is the most difficult, but it's really cute image, so go ahead and try it out. Don't be afraid of it just because it's challenging, all right? So we're gonna pick one of these, and we're just gonna copy it using this grid system. So I'm just gonna go with this one, because I do wanna cover cross-hatching. And I've labeled the file name of all these images with the dimensions. So if you want to get the correct proportions, each image has slightly different proportions. So this one, Portrait of a Goldsmith, is 9.5 inches tall by 6 inches wide. So in Photoshop, I modified them so that they should all fit into an 8x10 sketchbook. So this one is a little bit on the narrow side. So I'm going to pause the video and then lay that out with those measurements. Okay, I'm back. So how I did this, the easy way is I measured 9.5 inches and 6 this way, then boom, boom. And then I lightly drew an X that way and that way so that I could find the center. And I drew about roughly halfway between the center and here. I drew, I filled in that line and that line, and then there and there. So connecting this corner and this corner, going through the middle. I drew a little line here and a little line there, roughly in the center. And then that gave me 4 more X's. And that places the quarters, right? So we established the halves, and then now we established the quarters. And then I took those X's and connected to them like this and like that. Like that. So I didn't have to go and do this finicky math of what's half of 9.5 and what is a quarter of 9.5 and then do all that. So there's a lot of measuring you can do without actually measuring. All right. So I drew that fairly lightly. You can take your kneadable eraser and just lightly do that. I don't really need these lines to be super established because your brain can fill out where those intersections are. But if you feel more comfortable, you can definitely go back and fill them in. Okay, so I don't know if I made this, I explained this in one of my posts, but if for anybody who caught that or didn't catch it, the kneadable eraser is one of your best friends, and you just have to like pull at it and squish it to make it kind of fluffy and soft, and then you can squish it into points to clean up specific areas, or if you have it in a ball shape, then you can apply it like that and lift off layers of charcoal. So it's a really amazing tool. Okay, you show it to kids though, and they've never seen it before, and you tell them that's an eraser, they won't believe you. They'll go, that's not an eraser. All right, the grid technique. This is generally, it's a good technique to teach students as they develop their visual perception skills that we talked about. Over time, you don't need to do this anymore. It's very mechanical, kind of like that exercise that we did, like this. And you did really good on it. So I trust that you all did it upside down, and I was really happy to hear that that some people found the process kind of calming, and they found it a bit of a challenge to let go of the idea that they're drawing a person and then accept that they're just drawing lines. And the result wasn't quote unquote perfect. Neither is mine, because look at my face, it's a little weird, right? But I hope that they learned that all you're doing is moving information from one point to another, and sometimes you want to let go of the idea that you're drawing a thing and you're just moving information. The goal eventually is to teach the right brain to move information over so that you don't have to turn things upside down and you don't have to have a grid to guide you. It's just teaching your brain how to break down the information and reproduce it as just data. Okay, so each one of these boxes could be considered a composition all by themselves. So this one and this one, you could think of them as separate drawings, and there is a composition within each one, and hopefully that helps you establish the proportions of the entire thing more accurately. For myself, I'm just going to very lightly sketch the entire thing, keeping in mind how it's all placed. So right here, I can see that this point is a little past, little off of the center from here to there. So like, I'm not going to do that for every single point on here, but I'm sort of trying to help you analyze each of these compositions as a separate image, and then that will help you move all the proportions over and keep things accurate. So with this face here, the eyes are somewhere around there, the nose is about there, right at the just under the halfway point. So you could say that's halfway from here to there. And then mouth is just below that, so nose is maybe about there, mouth is here. And even though there's a bunch of different forms in here, at first when we're really lightly sketching, we're just going to simplify all of that, keeping in mind where the grid is. This whole chunk of hair, we're going to turn it into one big shape. So when I'm drawing from observation, like a person, something in front of me, or I'm drawing from a reference, I create this grid in my mind as I'm studying a thing. So this point right here on the right side of his eye, I would look down the image and go, where does that line up to? Okay, so it happens to be that far away from the middle of his collar, right? And as you develop your perception skills, and you can create grids in your mind as you're looking at a thing without having to see it, believe it or not. You start going, okay, well, where is the eyes in relationship to his hat? So they're actually at the same level as this curve in his hat. I'm not going to go through the entire thing because that will make this video fairly long. But I am going to just show you how I'm breaking this down into basic forms. And keeping these lines really, really light allows you to make changes. If you go, okay, that doesn't actually look right. That line needs to go over here a little bit. And this needs to be a bit higher right here. And then you have these sweeping lines that come down like this. So don't do any shading until your proportions are right. Always, always. He's got a big honking nose. Okay. So that is not exactly finished, but it's close enough that I feel that I can fill it out with the cross hatching, because that's a technique I definitely want you to learn. Building up form through just lines. Think of it as kind of a rough shading technique. Okay, this is a Staedtler Tri Plus fine liner. You can get them from Staples. I love these pens. They have a felt tip, and they're fairly durable, but you don't want to abuse them. But these draw for a really long time, and Staedtler is a fantastic company. So everything that they make, I think, is really high quality. So right now I'm just following that edge like we did in the blind contour. And I'm not following every single line that I put down here. I'm constantly reassessing, looking at both and going, okay, well, I could make the eye maybe a little bit higher than I had it there. And the eyebrow is made of a bunch of lines like that. And he's got a really sharp bridge of his nose. It scoops down, goes like that. Okay, this is a good place to stop and think about creating those visual grids. So this part of his nose, if I was to place a straight line going straight up, where is it in relationship to where his eye starts? I go like this. So that that part of his nose, it does not line up with his eye. His eye is farther across. So I was about to start it there, but now I realize I need to move it farther over. Do you notice how I'm constantly turning my wrist so that, like, I have a set of lines going this way, and I turn my wrist going this way because it's easier than pulling them this way. You want to follow the natural arc of how your wrist goes, and I said in an earlier post that drawing a straight line is easier this way, away from your body, than this way. At least I find it. And so if you are trying to copy a bunch of lines that go in this direction, that's the opposite direction of how your wrist moves. So you could try turning it upside down, going this. I'm not asking students to try to get every single line right, but each of those 4 drawings has slightly different rendering techniques. So if you're able to capture the general texture of what Durer was doing, then you're going to be learning his techniques and making yourself a better artist. So you notice how the heavier the lines and the more layers of cross-hatching, then the darker those areas get. And here he's applying less pressure, and there's less layering of lines. So right there's maybe 1 layer of lines, whereas here there's a set going this way and a set going this way, and they're fairly heavy, so there's this thicker, deeper shadow. And right there's a reflected light. It's hard to see, but there's a kind of a skinny band where the rendering is a little lighter. So just try to be aware of those little details. And right in his nose, all the rendering is a lot finer and more denser. So when he's doing that, when you're cross-hatching, you're taking sets of lines and you're kind of creating these planes. And I had a teacher that said, if imagine you have a block of solid material like marble or wood or even cheese, and you just like slicing sections of it off like this. So when you go like this, you are cutting planes. So you're kind of building a sculpture. Think of it that way. And you're establishing these flat areas. So these layers of lines do double duty. They create shadow, so they kind of show where the lighting is coming from. In this case, the light appears to be coming from the left-hand side because the shading right here is the strongest, and right there. So the lighting is coming from this side. And then there's maybe a wall on this side or some other surface where the light's bouncing off and coming back. And the way that his hair is rendered is different altogether. Well, it's still layers of lines, but they're not stacked on top of each other. So just try to emulate as best as you can what he's doing there. Once you have all your proportions established according to the grid. Okay, so I'm going to stop there because at this point, you don't have to use the pen. You can use a HB pencil if you want, or a darker pencil for these darker areas. But you want to try to get that range of tones that we're talking about. But instead of shading for this one, the specific drawing, you're going to try to just use layers and layers of lines. For the other three drawings, if you're to choose one of these other ones, then there's going to be more shading going on. But for the contour assignment next week, I think that learning different types of line systems is probably going to be the best practice for people right now. Okay, thanks for watching, and I'm going to keep posting more stuff through the week to help you with the assignment and all the other good stuff.